Pigweed here. Today we review an IPA and discuss our field trip to DC. Well, guys, good evening. How's it going? Longinus is here.
Hey, how about some beer and conversation?
Well, that's very good. What are we drinking?
This is a light IPA.
Is that really a
Session IPA.
Is that even a real thing?
It is a real thing. Yeah.
All right. Well, what's on your mind?
Well, you know, have you heard of the doorway effect?
Yeah.
So have you had a time where you're upstairs in your bedroom and you think, I need to go downstairs and get something or other. And you walk downstairs, and by the time you get there, you've forgotten what it was you were looking for.
No, it's never happened to me.
It happens all the time.
Yeah.
And the reason it happens is because of the doorway effect. When you walk through a doorway, your brain resets. Because you're moving from this room to that room. You're moving from one environment to a different environment. You're moving from one set of assumptions to a different set of assumptions.
Right.
And there's some weird thing that goes on when we walk through a doorway that our brain resets and kind of reimagines where we are. So the question now becomes, if you were aware of that and you wanted to reset people's minds as they come into a certain place, what would you do?
I guess you would make the space radically different from the previous space.
Yes, and you would have certain things in it that would
Like, ooh.
kind of make you realize I'm in a different place now, and would
Now I forgot that I came in here for my glasses.
and reframe the way you think about it. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So that's what's on my mind. But,
Okay.
but before we talk about that, I want to drink this beer.
Because I've always understood an IPA is automatically a heavier, more flavorful, more alcoholic version of a PA.
Yes.
So you've got a PA and then you've got an IPA, and
Yes.
they stack on top of each other.
Yes.
How do you get a skinny, lesser pale ale and call it an IPA?
Marketing.
We just don't have enough styles.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's about 25 different variations of IPA nowadays, and one of them
had to
is
go with a diet IPA.
the session IPA.
Yes, there's
or
the session.
the lightweight IPA, and basically what they're trying to say is we've got as much hops as the regular IPA.
Sheesh.
We've just toned down the alcohol and the malt.
Yeah, right. And
the calories.
And with it,
And the calories,
the
yeah.
calories and the carbs.
Right, so this beer is 1 calorie less than Mick Ultra.
Is that right?
Yeah.
95 calories.
95 calories.
Okay.
Yeah.
Slightly Mighty by Dogfish Head. Light India Pale Ale
Huh.
with monk fruit extract.
Wow.
Okay. So what do you think?
That's pretty good. That's pretty good. I guess the qualifier for the IPA-ness is the hop presence.
Well, that's from an American perspective. That's certainly true. And what I'm getting here is punch in the face, malt or hoppiness,
Yeah.
and very thin maltiness afterwards.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is-
it's light. It's light on the end.
Yes.
At the end. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Now,
that
what does the monk fruit have to do? I mean, does the monk fruit help it sort of blend together, or what's going on with that?
I don't know. I wonder if the sugars or whatever it is that makes monk fruit sweet, I wonder if those things don't ferment to give it a little bit of sweetness without.
I don't know. Have you ever seen a monk fruit? What does it look like?
I don't know.
A monk?
A monk.
What's that? Yeah, or you'll get these, or a hop that gives his passion fruit and boysenberry. I'm like, I don't know what either of those things.
Well, I know boysenberry, but I don't know passion fruit. Okay, so what do we? What was this trip that we took?
Yeah, so there's a million things to see in Washington D.C.
Yes.
But we went down specifically with architecture in mind.
This is some of the great buildings.
Some time ago, we did a show on Freemasonry.
Yes.
And in the process, I was like, you know what? People talk about the Masonic temple in Alexandria.
And
it's
you
something.
see it every time you go across the bridge.
Yes,
down there.
it's
right
like,
there.
you know what? Why don't we do that one day? And then we said, well, just not going to drive all the way down there to look at one building.
Yeah.
So let's look at a couple of buildings.
Yes.
But the first one we did was, now I looked up the Masonic temple.
Yeah.
and it got Masonic Temple with
There's a bunch of them.
followed by Detroit and
Yeah,
Chattanooga.
there's a lot.
That.
Yeah.
And then only to find that this one is the George Washington Masonic National Memorial.
Okay.
It is not the. It's
not a temple?
They don't. They don't use the word temple.
Okay.
And I get it because it is
Really
half
is about
museum.
George Washington, yeah.
It's half museum and
Right.
half Masonic temple, but it's a lovely building.
Yeah.
Started in 1922. Built slowly. I didn't notice this. Wasn't open to the. Well, it was completed, but not open to the public until 1970.
Okay.
But it was completed more, I think, more in the 30s,
Yeah.
post Depression.
Right.
And so, Longinus, what are you seeing here just by looking at that in terms of, architectural definition?
Well,
what would that tell you?
Well, the first thing is you have sort of a classical or Greek revival temple at the bottom, the base, right?
Yes, those columns and
Right,
the pediment.
The columns and the pediment, and then you have the two wings, and everything is very symmetrical. It's very ordered, and then on top of it is this big, huge tower, and that's sort of a flashback to Sir Christopher Wren and his rebuilding of London after the Great Fire of 1666.
And also a nod to what are the tower lighthouse of Alexandria.
Of the Alexandrian lighthouse,
Even though
right?
in Alexandria, Virginia.
Right, and so Alexandria, Virginia, it's a nod to the lighthouse in Alexandria, Egypt.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Didn't make that connection.
it's
And
beautiful.
then like everything on that building is probably every ornament, every detail has a symbolic significance.
And especially
as
when
you
you're dealing
look at
with the
with the sneaky
with the
Freemasons.
sneaky Freemasons, there's always going to be some, because there's all this.
What are they up to?
Because when we went on the tour, everything had some significance to it. The trowel means this, and the this means that.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
But it was always for benevolent reasons, and it was always for it was
Yes,
it was a fraternal organization. It sounded like at the time.
Yes. The thing that was the tour guide was definitely trying to get across was that the reason for the Freemasons is it's a fraternal organization, but they have a goal, which is to go out and do good deeds
Yes.
and to help people out. And there's all these different divisions of Freemasons that do different. Some people focus on dentistry, and some people focus on children's health, and some people they focus on a bunch of different things. But they're basically trying to do good works.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And there's some suspicion and distrust
Yes.
associated with them, only due to their secrecy.
Well, that I wouldn't say only, but that yes, because of their secrecy. Because whenever you have a secret organization, people are always wondering, okay, what do you?
And
hide?
they tend to be, wealthy people who are wealthy philanthropists.
Yeah.
So they're smart, they're science minded. They specifically do not engage in, religious or political activism.
Yeah.
Especially on premise.
Yeah, they're not. They're apparently that's one of the rules. You can't talk about religion or politics.
Now, but all right. So back to the building itself.
Yeah.
It was so cavernous in that beautiful opening room with the 17-foot George Washington
Yeah.
in it. So this is like we said is
And double wide Doric columns, right? So like on the side are these columns that are just so
bigger than they're
squat
necessary
and
to hold
wide.
anything up.
Yes,
It was
yes.
sort of, but it was kind of hard to understand what the tour guide was saying. He hit like the right pitch. If he was any louder, you couldn't hear him. But the echoes, like I thought maybe if I stand closer, maybe if I stand on the other side of the room. But there was something very just. The shape of the room and the polished marble everywhere.
Yes.
Right?
Well, if you think about the acoustics, then the stone is reflecting everything. Nothing
so
is
stony.
Yeah. So when you have that kind of environment, sound is echoing around all over the place. So it's not a great place for a talk.
It was tough.
So, and nowadays, and there are several universities and institutions that have actual degrees in acoustic architecture.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Interesting.
So
Yes, but they had a lovely. There's a lovely theater. There's the actual temple where the where the meetings take place. And then
the lodge rooms.
The lodge room, yes.
Yeah.
And then there was a lot of artifacts of George Washington's life.
Yes.
So it's part George Museum and part Masonic Temple.
Yeah, exactly. So there were the lodge rooms, and there was the stuff dedicated to George Washington, and there was actually like a Christian chapel in one of the top floors
Right.
that had some four panels, cut glass, stained glass windows that had scenes from the Gospels, and a Christian altar, and so it was a very Christian temple there.
Yes, with some Knights Templar.
Yeah. Well, that was very interesting because the original Knights Templar died out in like the 13th or 14th century,
Yeah.
and then the Masons kind of revived Knights Templar as part of the Masons.
Yeah. So I asked the guy, like, so what was the?
Yeah.
I mean, if there's no connection to the Crusades, then what is why do they attach themselves to the imagery of it? And he was basically, I said, because it looks cool. He's like, yeah, kind of. It's just so they had some knights-looking armor and guys there. Yes, in the room with the Christian
Knights
chapel.
Templar sounds cool.
It does.
Yeah, and going back, George Washington was a Mason. We had how many presidents were Masons?
14 presidents
14.
were Masons. They were up there. But I asked him, I said, so how many signers of the Declaration of Independence? He says, he says like 4.
Oh.
So I thought the whole Founding Fathers crew, but Franklin was.
Yeah, Franklin.
And George Washington was, but not Thomas Jefferson, and so it wasn't as prevalent as I had assumed.
Right.
But,
So that's one of the reasons why they use the classical architecture to say that Masons are and the whole rise of the George Washington Masonic Temple is probably to say, hey, Masons are part of America.
Yeah.
We are patriots. We are part of this great country, and we want to be noticed.
yes, the generals and political class of the time, even though, like I said, there wasn't that many founding fathers, but of that class, a lot of them were Masons. That was a big thing. That's a kind of.
Now, we do have to call attention to the fact that when they took us on the tour, they only allowed us to go on certain floors.
Yes.
Because the floors we had to miss, that was where they did the human sacrifice.
Yes, and where they meet to basically decide the fate of the planet.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah, George Soros and some other
Yes,
guys show up in there.
yes.
And,
That's what it is.
And one of the best highlights.
There.
One of the highlights, of course, is walking out. I guess on the 9th floor.
Yeah, that was cool.
And looking at sort of the skyline.
It was an amazing view from
Yeah,
up there. It was
fantastic
very,
view
very
of the
nice.
city because you're right. So you're not in the city where it's on all sides. You get a nice.
I mean,
panorama.
DC is so flat.
Yes.
That if you get a decent elevation, you can see very far.
How come? Where are all the skyscrapers? How come all the cities, even Baltimore, has bigger buildings than DC? DC is the most important city in the world, and they got no tall buildings.
They don't want anything to be taller than the Washington Monument.
No, they don't.
Yes.
That explains that.
That's the 1901, 1902 Macmillan Commission report. When they said, we don't want anything taller than the Washington Monument, and that's going to be written in law.
What is that? 500 feet, something like that?
Yeah, I guess.
Well, I think the tallest buildings have 14 floors, 13 floors, something like
Is
that.
that what the deal is?
Yeah. Yeah, so you don't get a whole lot of huge buildings in DC, but that makes a very open, because like there are places in New York where you're between buildings that are so high it's almost like nighttime in the day because no sunlight gets down there. In DC it's very open and sunny.
No, it's very nice that it doesn't have skyscrapers.
Yes.
I can't imagine that ever changing.
So what do you want to talk about the strange elevator?
Yeah.
So the elevator, if you look at the Masonic memorial from the outside, it starts off wide and it gets narrower and narrower and narrower
As you go up.
and the elevator is over on the edge. So as it goes up, it has to go at an angle to go up into the top, which was kind of interesting. That was a riddle that the guy.
Yeah, it
gave
was.
us.
Yes, he said, what is unique about this elevator? And it's not the shape, which had a funny shape. It wasn't square.
Yeah, it was like octagonal.
Yeah,
Or something. Yeah.
this is not the shape, and that was a little kicker. And then
Sort of like the Enterprise elevator, right?
That's right. Moves
That goes-
around different
then there was
Three
that
different
one
ways.
lady who misunderstood what he was saying, and she was just so fascinated. She's like, I can't believe we're going sideways. How are we going That's amazing. We're going sideways. Went 7 degrees, not straight up and down.
That's right. It's just going at a slight angle.
Based on the shape of and did you think that we were getting off on each floor was level with the ground? Did you realize when you walked out that you were actually in the air? I don't know. She was just
anyway, so that was a cool place. The Masonic Memorial was very nice. I liked it.
I did too. So the buildings, there's just great buildings all over the place. Now we had to go down to the heart of the city.
So we wanted to see the Supreme Court, and we wanted to get inside, but unfortunately they wouldn't let us because Longinus was carrying a.
Well, that was the capital.
That was the capital.
Oh
sorry,
yeah.
So we couldn't actually get inside.
I should be a good domino right now.
That's right. We couldn't get into the Supreme Court, but we walked around outside and looked at some of the imagery on the outside, and that was actually very interesting. So what is that triangular thing on the top again?
Pediment.
The pediment, yeah. So the pediment has these
two-sided
interesting characters in statues up there.
Right. So there's 2 pediments, one from the front and one from the back.
Okay.
Right.
And then there's also a person on each corner of the building.
Right. Well, 2 people on each corner.
2 people on each corner around the edges.
2 people, one on each side of a corner.
And it reminded me of kind of the foundations of Western civilization. That now typically people think of the foundations of Western civilization as being Greek and Roman antiquity and the Bible. And then some people add in the Germanic tribes. But when you look at the people who were represented in the architecture of the building, it basically followed that pattern. I mean, Hammurabi is not any of those, but
the front is Hammurabi and Moses,
right?
So, right, Babylonian and Hebrew.
And Hammurabi was the first law? Yeah, I mean, he was the first one to write any type of law in West.
Right.
So just like what I say goes,
or the first that we have record of.
Right.
Anyway.
Right.
Yeah, right.
Then you had the Romans on one side, Julian and Gaius.
Yeah.
Then the other side is Plato and Aristotle. And then,
they aren't really lawgivers, but they still have something to do with understanding those kinds of things, right?
And then in the back,
Demosthenes and Cicero, who were Greek philosophers.
So those are the corners.
Yep.
The front is a bunch of characters that represent things, not actual
people.
Not actual people.
Allegories, right?
Yes, but the back has
actual people.
The center of the back has actual people, and there are.
So what are the things that were represented? I know there was a tortoise and hare, and there were a couple other things like that. But
the tortoise and the hare, that's the back.
Okay.
Right.
The front is these guys.
Oh, okay. Oh, I see. So we have
allegorical figures.
Research council. I don't understand what's going on here.
So these are actual people.
Okay.
And then you have order, liberty, authority. Then you have, John Marshall, I think, early.
Right. One of the early Supreme Court justices. Yeah. So these people were just supposed to represent something?
Right.
You have things like that it's not just people.
Right. So they order
liberty, authority. In the back, the 3 central figures are Confucius, Moses,
and Solon.
Yes.
So it's fascinating because, of course, Confucius is right out of China, so he's not Western culture whatsoever.
Right.
But we felt compelled to represent him because he is one of the greatest lawgivers in history.
Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting choice. The 2 sides are flanked with the tortoise and the hare,
which is a very strange thing to put in there.
It is interesting, and we went by that lamp post that was being held up by turtles.
Yeah.
Again, it's
the idea that the slow and steady wins the race,
and just that justice should be slow and deliberate.
Yep.
That they were very mindful of that, which is why we have a 6-year Senate, which is why they wanted bills to be passed very slowly. You don't have an incident over here and then everybody runs into a room and makes a new law tomorrow. Right? Everybody settle down here. Calm down.
Wait. Let's do
Think
this.
about it.
Let's do some thinking. Let's do some research.
To the masses.
Good advice. I mean, you'd give your daughter that advice if she was good. If she was proposed, and you would say, "Well, make sure you think it through."
Right. On the very front, you have those big columns, and then 2 big statues, left and right.
They're
male
all
and a
women.
female.
No. It's a female here, the contemplation of justice, and a man, the authority of law.
Interesting.
Yeah, and you know what? This is the kind of thing that makes you wonder how much of this symbolism and this representational stuff actually affects people. Because I was thinking about these cases that are about to come before the court where I think Louisiana passed a law saying that the 10 Commandments have to be in every public school. And that case, whether the 10 Commandments can be in every school, is going to be heard in a court that probably has the 10 Commandments engraved in marble on the wall of that building.
And where Moses is the central figure on the outside.
On the outside, yeah. So it's very odd that we design these buildings with certain messages. We say we honor Confucius and Hammurabi and Moses and so on and Gaius and all these different people, but then does that really affect the way people are ruling or thinking about the principles?
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah,
we'll find out in
one.
a little while.
That's a good one.
Well, and there's also the fact is that evolution, that culture changes, and that symbols actually change their meaning. Some symbols are change their meaning slower than others. If you look at fashion. That changes every year, but fashion means something. Oh my God, there's Britain in a quite fashionable suit, and he's slick and wise, and and next year it's like, oh, he's in that suit. He's kind of dumpy and slow, and so there's that kind of thing. But images and objects all have different meanings, and they all change the meanings at different rates.
Right. But I think the idea of neoclassicism was like, all right, this
is eternal.
These are right. This isn't an architectural style that started in France 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Since we're building a city here, let's just go with the old classics.
You're not going to carve something in marble that's going to be out of fashion in a year.
Well, in a year, but it's going to have a different meaning 100 years from now, because the different associations and relationships that object or that building.
Well, it could, but I think the choice of
Right.
an architectural style that's already 2,000 years old.
Right, Ray's trying to make that.
You're like, all right, I think this one's pretty solid here.
So the question then would be the idea that does the classical architectural style retain its meaning longer, and is it more permanent than the Queen Anne style of the 1880s or the international style of the 1940s?
Very much. I mean, if you put something up there with neoclassical, you're like, that's pretty solid. If you made something that was Art Deco, you'd go like, that's cool, but reminds me of the 40s in Miami. And
I wonder to what extent.
That's a fascinating topic. Yeah.
To some extent, this all depends on education, because somebody sees, Moses with 2 tablets, and they have to know the Bible to some extent. They have to know who Moses is and what those 2 tablets represent. And if you don't have an education where people know who these people are, then the symbol.
Well, that's a good point. I mean, because that was a given.
Yeah.
Right.
It's always been a given that basic education means understanding the Bible, and I don't think there's that appreciation of it.
And just
that's why
basic
people are
history.
just
And that's what culture really is, right?
Yes.
It's common knowledge.
Yes.
of a people or of a group of people.
Yeah, you have to understand that it's there is more to understand. There's way more to understanding the Bible than the faith that it represents. That the Bible is only relevant if you are a firm believer.
Yeah,
Right,
that's just silly.
It's just silly.
There's so many.
It's our common language. It's
Yes.
how we relate to each other. It's like I have to be able to say the Garden of Eden and know that you know what I mean without having to explain it to you.
In a sense, it's like referring to Shakespeare. You know, Shakespeare has influenced our culture so dramatically.
Right.
And it's not like you have to believe any particular thing to understand Shakespeare. You just have to understand that.
Right? You say this politician's wife is like Lady Macbeth.
Yeah.
Do I have to explain it? This is all part of our common cultural understanding.
Yes.
And the Bible is part of that.
Yes. And that's one of the things that when you look at this kind of architecture and you see these images and you realize that it's referring to a cultural heritage that goes back hundreds and thousands, goes way, way back. You have Moses,
It goes back to the first democracy,
right? Yes.
I mean that's why the fathers of this country chose to build in the classical architecture. Yeah. That's why there was the federal architecture, which was very classical, was because they wanted to have all the references back to democracy because they were creating a democracy.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah. Birth of democracy is a new democracy.
But new and old at the same time.
Yes.
New, but also relying upon the common heritage that we have from.
Right, new, not, and we just invented this. New, yes. It has a very long tradition, and
we've revived it.
Yes,
yes,
yeah. Okay.
Well, we could go with that theme to the next building.
The religious theme?
Yeah.
So, why didn't we? I thought we were going to go to the Basilica.
Yeah. So you mentioned the Basilica. And I've been to the Basilica, and it's nice, but I said the Basilica can't hold a candle to the Cathedral of St. Matthew.
So that's why we decided let's put that on the architectural tour,
yes.
And let's go see what Crowhill is talking about in this building squished into downtown with no land around it. It's just sort of pinched in between a couple of buildings.
Yes. Right. And from the outside, from my perspective from the outside, not very impressive. But I noticed that you were out there looking very intently at the outside.
Yeah, it was what I guess I would call as an architectural style, sort of a Romanesque. Okay. I don't know. We could call it a Richardsonian Romanesque, which is after H.H. Richardson, who was a famous architect in the 19th century. But it was very, it had 4 different types of masonry materials on it. There was large arches.
It had bricks and it had big blobs of sandstone.
And it was terracotta.
Yeah, there was a lot of different things going on there.
And, you had big arches and it was sort of squat looking. And that really comes from, when we say Romanesque, that really comes from the dark ages of what was being built in Italy at the time, northern Italy, these big, stone massive pieces to it. Mm-hmm. So I think that was really the part of it. But as you said, you look at it, you're like, it's, you're not drawn to it.
It's not particularly impressive from the outside.
Right. So St. Matthew's itself was established in 1840 at 15th and H. But the new church, this is the one that we went to, began in 1893.
And finished up in...
It was dedicated in 1913 and designated as a cathedral in 1939 when the Archdiocese of Washington was established.
So the cathedral is where the bishop is.
Right. So the building was done in 1913, but it wasn't called... the bishop until 1930. So let's just say
cathedra is chair, so the cathedral is the chair of the bishop. So so this is where they had the funeral for John F. Kennedy, by the way.
Okay.
But the thing that I find incredibly impressive about this building is you go inside and every nook and cranny, everything you look at, there's detail, there's symbolism, there's some interesting thing going on everywhere you look.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
And the what appear to be paintings from a distance are teeny tiny little tiles.
Yes.
Right,
Mosaics, right.
everywhere.
Yeah.
It's almost like, little physical prayers to God.
And how
Pretty amazing.
right?
Yeah.
You think how when you're working at obviously at arm's length, how do you see the finished product? Where you're going from that? Do you place 5 tiles and then back up 50 feet? I mean, or you just
Right.
you've done this your whole lifetime. You
Yeah.
get it, but it's remarkable.
That level of art just totally escapes me. I don't understand how people do it.
Now, what I also noticed, so there's it's not a pointy steeple. There's a cupola at the top, and
Yes.
that's all windows letting light in, and that's beautiful.
It's pretty amazing. It's very high.
But
Right.
there's no stone stained glass. And
No.
I thought, that's
Yeah,
something that I'm kind of used to in a cathedral.
Right.
But that was a
And the other thing, the floor plan of the inside was of almost like a Greek cross.
Yes. It was traditional to build. Now, one thing that's interesting is that the altar faces north. Typically, altars would face east in a Catholic church. So I'm kind of curious about that. Why was the altar to the north in this building? But they had multiple different chapels.
Yep.
There was
The Marian Chapel.
There was the Marian Chapel. There was a St. Francis area. There was a chapel for marriage up to the right that had those freaky gold statues. And then up on the top, around when you get to the central area of the church, they had Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And then there was a great big thing of St. Matthew in the very beginning behind the main altar. That was another those things made out of tile. What are those called?
Mosaics?
Mosaics, thank you.
Yeah.
Here's a huge mosaic of St. Matthew. But every place I looked, you'd walk around and you'd look at a pillar, and you'd look down at the bottom of the pillar, and there would be designs around the bottom of it.
Yeah, the ornamentation was everywhere.
Yeah.
And that's very churchy, right? That's,
How does that? So let's get back to what I said in the opening about
Which I like,
when you walk through a doorway, you're entering into another place.
Totally.
What is the psychological impact of walking into a place that's so huge and grand like that?
Right. Well, first of all, I would say that's what you stated was always a goal of an architect, right? They always want to make you feel something as you move through things and push things, and
Right.
And even as we decorate our houses,
Sure.
we do the exact same thing.
Yes.
You want
So
to evoke
This is
the
a
feeling,
casual
right?
room. This is a formal room. This
Yeah.
is,
This is a little fun, whimsical area.
Yes. Yeah.
And this is the bar room basement where we sneak down. And,
They sneak down, yes. And then a church should inspire and a sense of grandeur and something greater than you, and you should be made to feel small. And
But also, yes, all those things, and also surrounded by a company of other people. Like you go into a church like that, and there's angels and saints, and there's Mary, and there's St. Francis, and there's Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and there's all this stuff, and you're like, I'm in the company of other people.
But what about a all wooden Presbyterian church, right? There's
right.
a different feeling.
There is
right?
a very different feel.
They're very simple. There is not that ornamentation.
Yes.
And that's very deliberate too.
Yes.
And
this
that
gets back to-
presents its own sort
Yes.
of experience.
This to me, it's a very reductionist intellectual view of things, which basically says, if I don't understand it, it should be thrown away. Like if I don't understand the value of having this ornamentation in the church, then I'm going to strip things down only to the things that are intellectual and clear to me. And I think that's such an impoverishment of this. It's a spiritual impoverishment. It's a cultural impoverishment. It's an artistic impoverishment. It's like, how much have you lost here because you've basically said, I'm only going to take the things that I can understand.
Right. But I mean, if you take it further too, and you look at the Quakers, the Quakers were extremely simple too, and they were doing that simplicity, but they were doing it to say, y'all should come here to go inside. And to go in and plumb the depths of your own consciousness, to find the light within, and we're not going to have anything out here that's going to
I see.
Take your eye away.
That's a very interesting point, because that's another way. So when I mention you come in and you're in the presence of angels and saints and all this other, that definitely presents one mindset. But another mindset is, no, it's so bare that all you've got is what's in your head. And that can be both good and bad.
Yeah.
Or in your heart, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, when I was working for a church restoration company, we went into all sorts of churches all over the place.
Yep.
And some of them were extremely bare and simple. Methodists were getting very simple, especially when you got out into the country and the rural areas. Of course, the rural churches were a lot more simpler than the city churches.
Just for money.
Yeah, because of the money. There's different ways to do it, and the great religion and Christianity also has that tension between the exoteric side of Christianity and the esoteric side of Christianity, the inner and the outer side, and where you're pushing yourself to go and be.
Yeah, well, we discussed this on the ornate church versus the storefront church, and the idea being, well, if St. Paul would have said, give all your money to the poor. What are you spending billions of dollars on a church when you could be saving the poor with this, with the money that you spent on that? It goes either way.
Right, but we are saving the poor with the fancy ornamental church, because we're giving them a spiritual experience to uplift who they are and to orient themselves to God.
And what about the $25 million for a Gulfstream jet for the preacher,
for the mega church preacher,
for the mega church preacher, for Joel Osteen, So then there's that. Okay.
Well, I guess you could say, what was the story of Jesus and where he tips over the temple
money changers.
Money changers.
Okay, but I think you're probably thinking of when the woman came in and put the costly perfume on his feet, and the apostles said, "Couldn't this have been sold and the money given to the poor?"
I don't even know that story.
Okay,
yeah.
But so there's always that sort of that tension. But I got to tell you, hey, I'm kind of happy and glad that. Our ancestors in old Europe decided to build those great churches, and I'm glad somebody built St. Matthew's.
And I wouldn't have driven an hour down there to see a Quaker meeting house.
That's true. It's nice there's beauty in the world.
Yes.
Well, we could do that.
I actually have a question.
So we're moving on here. So the architectural tour of DC could go on for days and days and days, but we saw three great ones. That was the Mormon Temple, the Supreme Court.
Not the Mormon Temple. We didn't do the Masonic.
The Masonic Temple.
And it wasn't even a temple.
It was a memorial, yes.
And
the Supreme Court. And we kind of saw the outside of the Capitol, and we saw St. Matthew's.
I got the law, the
law and
religious,
the
the prophets, and the Masons
and
somewhere
the Masons,
in between.
Wherever they are.
All right, so that was very good.
The law givers and the religious spiritual folks.
That's a good summation. All right, so we're done with that. You got anything else to say?
I do. So I have a question from a reader. The Book Nerd 23 asks about our Stephen King show.
Oh, the Stephen King show. Yes.
Is King a writer of great literature or just somebody who writes popular books? Is he closer to Hemingway or Nora Roberts?
Ooh, that's a very good question, right? Because my first reaction, before we read a bunch of King, I would have said Nora Roberts.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, he appeals to the masses.
Yes.
Good for him. He's got a nice life. People like to read him. Enjoy yourselves.
Right.
But he ain't literature, for crying out loud.
But, I haven't read tons of King until today. I think I've read 2 books by King. But when I read this one, I kind of took a different approach. I was trying to understand what is it about his writing that makes it so popular. How is it that he appeals? It's not just that it's scary.
He's right.
It's not
just scary scene after scary scene.
No, it's not just that.
Can't be.
There's really some very good craftsmanship going on in this writing.
Well, there's good craftsmanship that exposes and illustrates, I think, some deep tensions in American society and culture. I think that he has jumped on that and was able to expose it through his writing. I mean, if I'm going to be the main professor who is arguing that this is the fine literature, and I'm teaching classes on Stephen King, I'm putting Stephen King books right next to Ernest Hemingway and The Great Gatsby and Moby Dick.
Well, there you go. So Longinus is coming down on the side of Hemingway over Nora Roberts
on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday.
Yeah, so I don't know. I don't know enough about literature to really have a hugely informed opinion on this. But it seemed as I read these stories and kind of reflected on the craft and what's going on, I thought it was more than just popular writing.
Yeah, I thought that he can create unique and clear relationships between people. A very human interaction, very human reactions, without relying entirely on scare scenes.
Yes, exactly.
I was very impressed with just plain writing as opposed to, and then by him throwing in the scary zinger, doesn't diminish him as a writer.
Popular writing is not bad writing.
Not necessarily.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, Lee Child is a master of his prose, and he does the Jack Reacher things. David...
Edgar Rice Burroughs, for that matter. It's popular, fun, pedestrian writing. Doesn't mean it's bad writing. It's just a different style.
So for me, the great writer and literature, the very good, is great. There's great storytelling, but does it reveal something about the human condition?
There you go.
I think is really where you get to the next with literature.
And I think Stephen King absolutely qualifies on that.
And as you look at the history of literary criticism and literary theory, that type of thinking has gone out of favor and has been replaced by the postmodernists who would say, by the way, there really isn't a difference between Herman Melville and Stan Lee.
Yeah.
And
just one other reason not to like the postmodernists.
Well, I was going to say there's a point there, right?
French.
Yeah.
But I won't say but I also still believe that there is something different between Moby Dick or Billy Budd or Great Gatsby
and Calvin and Hobbes.
Yeah. Okay, so I say let's agree that Stephen King is more than just
popular book writing.
More than just popular book. All right.
Cheers. Thanks so much for listening to Beer and Conversation with Pigweed and Crowhill. Remember to visit us at pigweedandcrowhill.com or send us an email at pigweedshow@gmail.com.